My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old, and I really thought I had found the love of my life. But before I continue, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more real stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, have you ever experienced something like this? Where are you watching from? Because look, when I started living this story, I never imagined it would end the way it did. I met Mark on one of those ordinary autumn days in Seattle. It was at a coffee shop in Pike Place Market, you know. I had accidentally spilled my coffee. I was in a hurry, late for a meeting, and he just showed up with napkins and that smile that seemed to light up the cloudy day. We started talking. He bought me another coffee, and out of nowhere we were already laughing like old friends. There was something about him that made me feel safe, like I had finally found someone who really saw me, you know? It wasn't just physical attraction. It was a connection I had never felt before. He was an architect. He worked on sustainable projects. He talked passionately about building a better future. And I fell in love not only with the man, but with the worldview he had. It seemed too good to be true. But I wanted to believe. I wanted so badly to believe. The first 6 months were magical. Mark was attentive, caring. He always sent good morning messages. He took me to dinner at small, charming restaurants. We spent weekends exploring trails on Mount Rainier, having picnics, talking about everything. He met my family on Thanksgiving and was a hit. My mom loved him. My dad said I had finally found a real man. And even my younger brother, who's super critical, approved. We talked about the future, about moving in together, about maybe having kids someday. He said I was the woman he had always been looking for, that with me he felt complete, that our connection was special. And I believed every word, every promise, every plan. After a year of dating, we decided to move in together. We found a beautiful apartment in Capitol Hill, with a view of the city, huge windows that let in that diffuse Seattle light I love so much. We decorated together. We chose every piece of furniture, every painting, every detail. I remember thinking, while we were assembling the living room bookshelf, this is building a life with someone. This is what I always wanted. We split the bills, the household chores, the dreams. He worked a lot, sometimes stayed late at the office, but I understood. He was a dedicated, committed professional. I worked as a marketing manager at a tech company, so I also had my busy days. We fit together perfectly, or at least that's what I thought. That's what I felt. That's what I needed to believe. Mark was affectionate in just the right amount. He gave me space when I needed it, but was also present in important moments. When my grandmother passed away, he held my hand throughout the funeral. He hugged me while I cried. He cooked for me for an entire week because he knew I had no strength for anything. When I got a promotion at work, he organized a surprise with my closest friends to celebrate. It was gestures like these that made me certain I had chosen the right person, that we were going to grow old together, that our story was one of those that works out. I would look at him sleeping next to me and think, how lucky I am to have found you. But the truth is that luck, sometimes, is just a well-constructed illusion, and I didn't know that yet. Everything started to change so subtly that I almost didn't notice. It was like those temperature changes you only notice when you're already shivering from cold, you know? Mark started working even later. He'd come home at 10, 11 at night, sometimes even later. He said he had a big project, an important client, that he needed to handle it. I believed him, of course. Why would I doubt? He had always been dedicated to work, always been ambitious, and I admired that about him. But along with the overtime came other small changes. He started taking his phone to the bathroom, something he never did before. He'd leave the screen face down when it was on the table. Sometimes I'd see him typing and smiling. When I'd ask, "What's up?" he'd say, "Oh, nothing, just work people," and change the subject quickly. They were minimal details, almost imperceptible, but they started forming a pattern in my head. There was a specific night that stayed engraved in my memory. We were on the couch watching a movie. His phone vibrated. He looked at it, tensed up for a second, and got up saying he needed to take a work call. He went to the bedroom and closed the door. I stayed there, alone in the living room, hearing the muffled murmur of his voice, and for the first time I felt a pit in my stomach. It wasn't exactly jealousy. It was more like intuition, you know? That strange feeling that something wasn't right, but that you try to push down because you don't want to deal with the possibility that your perfect world is cracking. When he came back, I asked if everything was okay. He said yes, that it was just an emergency with a client, and he kissed me on the forehead. But the kiss was different, mechanical, without that connection we always had, and I pretended not to notice. The weeks went by and Mark started to become more emotionally distant too. We had sex less, and when we did, it seemed like he was there just on autopilot, without that intensity he always had. He stopped making small, affectionate gestures. He no longer sent cute messages during the day, didn't surprise me with my favorite coffee, didn't hug me from behind while I cooked. When I tried to talk about it, he said he was stressed with work, that it wasn't anything about me, that I was being too sensitive, and I believed him, because it was easier to believe than face the truth. I started blaming myself, thinking that maybe I was demanding too much, that maybe I needed to be more understanding, give more space. I did that mental gymnastics we do when we love someone and don't want to lose them. We convince ourselves that the problem is ours, not theirs. There was a Saturday when he said he needed to go to the office to solve some urgent things. On a Saturday. I thought it was strange but didn't question it. I stayed home. I cleaned the entire apartment. I prepared a special dinner thinking that when he came back we could have a nice night together. Reconnect, you know? But he only arrived at 11 at night. Tired. He barely looked at the food I had made. He said he had already eaten something on the way and went straight to the shower. He lay in bed and fell asleep without saying goodnight. I stayed awake looking at the ceiling, feeling an enormous weight in my chest. That horrible feeling of losing someone but not knowing how to hold on. I cried silently that night, with him sleeping next to me, and I felt like the loneliest person in the world. It's a strange pain, being next to someone you love and feeling completely alone. I started paying more attention to everything. I noticed he had changed his phone password. Before it was the date of our first kiss. Now it was something I didn't know. I noticed he had started using a different cologne, more sophisticated. I noticed that sometimes he came home with that smell of women's perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked, he said it was from some colleague in the elevator, or from the meeting. He always had a reasonable explanation, and I wanted so badly to believe those explanations that I forced my mind to accept. Even when my heart was already screaming that something was wrong. Female intuition is real, people. We feel when something has changed, when someone is hiding something from us. But sometimes we're so afraid of the truth that we prefer to live in the comfortable lie for a while longer. And that was exactly what I was doing. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. And I kept pretending everything was fine. I kept waking up every day next to him. I kept cooking. I kept planning our future. But inside, something was dying. My self-esteem started to crumble. I started looking at myself in the mirror and questioning myself. Am I not pretty enough? Interesting enough? What's wrong with me? I started changing the way I dressed, trying to get more attention from him, trying to reconquer something that maybe was never really mine, and nothing worked. He remained distant. He remained with his phone protected. He kept coming home late, and I kept swallowing hard. I kept accepting. I kept diminishing myself more and more. Everything collapsed on a Thursday in March. Mark had told me he was traveling for work to San Francisco, an architecture conference. He'd be away for 5 days. He kissed me on the forehead before leaving. He said he'd miss me, and I even said, "I'll miss you too, love. Have a good trip." I spent the day working normally, until at night I received a message from Jessica, my best friend since college. She had sent a photo with the caption, "I didn't want to have to show you this, but you need to know." When I opened the image, I felt my stomach turn. It was Mark, at the Seattle airport, hugging a blonde woman I had never seen in my life. And it wasn't a coworker hug. It was an intimate embrace, his hands on her waist, both smiling, looking at each other in that way we only look when there's intimacy, when there's history, when something real is happening. My hands started shaking so much I almost dropped my phone. I read Jessica's message again, and again, as if the third time the words would change, as if it were a mistake, a misunderstanding, but it wasn't. The photo was clear. The date and timestamp proved it had been taken today, a few hours ago. I sat on the kitchen floor and felt my entire body start to crumble. That feeling when you discover that everything you believed was a lie. That the person you loved was living a parallel life, cheating on you while you made plans for the future. It's physical pain, people. It's not just emotional. It's pain you feel in your chest, in your stomach, in your throat. Pain that feels like it's going to swallow you whole. I called Jessica crying. She came running to my apartment. She hugged me while I sobbed, unable to form complete sentences, just repeating, How could he? How could he do this to me? Jessica stayed with me all night, making tea, holding my hand, letting me cry until I had no more tears. But along with the pain came anger, an anger I had never felt in my life. How had he deceived me all this time? How many times had he lied? Who was this woman? How long had this been going on? The questions wouldn't stop spinning in my head, torturing me, driving me crazy. I grabbed the laptop, and I don't know where I got the courage, but I logged into his email. We used to share passwords before everything started to change, and apparently he had forgotten to change that one. What I found there destroyed me completely. Hundreds of emails to someone named Vanessa. Romantic, intimate emails, planning meetings, trips. He had said he was going to conferences, but was actually going on romantic getaways with her. There were emails with hotel reservations, restaurants, even gifts he had bought for her. Expensive gifts, the kind he never gave me. I discovered they had been together for almost 8 months. 8 months. While I woke up every day next to him, while I cooked for him, while I planned our future, he was living a double life. She was an interior designer. She worked in the same building as him. Apparently they met at a networking event. The emails showed deep intimacy. They had pet names for each other. Inside jokes. Plans. He said to her the same things he said to me, that she was special, that he had never felt this before, that he was in love. Every word was a stab in my chest. I read a specific email that broke me in two. It was from him to her, from 2 days ago. I can't wait for this trip with you, my love. 5 days, just ours. Without having to pretend, without having to hide. Sometimes it's tiring to keep up appearances, but soon we'll be able to be together for real. You're everything I've always wanted. Keep up appearances. I was just an appearance to him. A role he played while living his real life with someone else. I closed the laptop and screamed. I screamed loud, so hard my throat hurt. Jessica hugged me again, but I felt empty, destroyed, like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest and stomped on it. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake thinking about every lie, every betrayal, every moment he pretended to love me while loving someone else. And it was in that early morning, in that absolute rock bottom, that something changed inside me. The pain started transforming into something different, into determination, into cold anger, into thirst for justice. I wasn't going to let this man destroy me completely. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. I was going to rebuild myself. And when he came back from that trip with his mistress, he was going to find a completely different woman, stronger, more aware, and definitely out of his life. The following days were the worst of my life. I couldn't eat. I couldn't work properly. I couldn't sleep without having nightmares about him and her together. I texted my boss saying I was sick, that I needed a few days, and I locked myself in the apartment. Jessica tried to stay with me, but I asked her to leave, because I needed to be alone, process all of that, feel the pain to the end. I spent hours lying on the bedroom floor, in the same place where we made love, where I thought we were happy, and I cried until I was dehydrated. It's funny how we idealize the people we love, how we create a version of them in our head and fall in love with that version. And when reality appears, when the mask falls, we realize we never really knew who was by our side. Mark wasn't who I thought. Maybe he never had been. I looked at the apartment and saw our memories in every corner, and each memory was now contaminated by betrayal. That couch where we watched movies cuddled together, he was probably sitting there thinking about her. That bed where we slept together, he probably touched me but thought about touching her. Even the gifts he gave me became objects of torture. Did he buy them to compensate for guilt? Did he give her better gifts? I started questioning absolutely everything. Every "I love you," he said. Every promise of a future. Every moment I thought was special. Was any of it real? Or was I just convenient? Someone to keep up appearances while he built a real life with another person. These questions corroded me inside, made me feel tiny, worthless, disposable. There was a specific moment when I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. I had deep dark circles, red and swollen eyes from crying so much, messy hair, wrinkled clothes. I looked like a ghost of myself, and at that moment, a deep shame hit me. Shame for having been deceived. Shame for not noticing sooner. Shame for being foolish enough to believe I was loved when I was actually just a convenient option. I felt pathetic. Mark tried to call me several times during the trip. I didn't answer. He sent messages asking if everything was okay, saying he missed me. The audacity of this man made me even more furious. How did he have the nerve to pretend he loved me while he was with her? How could he dissociate so well? Live two parallel lives without apparently feeling any conflict? I blocked his number. I blocked him on all social media. I blocked him in every way possible. I didn't want to hear his voice. I didn't want to see his face. I didn't want to have to confront him at that moment because I knew I would implode, and I needed to pull myself together first. In those days of isolation, I really hit rock bottom. I questioned everything about myself. Wasn't I pretty enough? Interesting enough? Was there something wrong with me that made him seek another person? I know these are irrational thoughts. That betrayal is the betrayer's choice and not the betrayed person's fault. But when you're in all that pain, rationality goes away, and you start blaming yourself, diminishing yourself, internalizing a rejection that has nothing to do with your value. I spent hours scrolling through Vanessa's social media feed. She had a public profile, and everything was so perfect, so curated, so competitive. Photos in beautiful places, expensive clothes, apparently incredible life, and there I was, at rock bottom, comparing myself to a woman who didn't even know me but who had destroyed my life. It was pure masochism, but I couldn't stop looking, as if I could find some answer there, some explanation for why I wasn't enough. But there's something about hitting rock bottom, about being completely destroyed. The only possible direction is up. On the fourth day alone in that apartment, I woke up, and something had changed. The pain was still there, deep, throbbing, but along with it came a clarity I didn't have before. I deserved more than this. I deserved more than being deceived, betrayed, treated as a second option. I deserved honest, true, reciprocal love. And if Mark couldn't give me that, then he didn't deserve to be in my life. Simple as that. I got out of bed. I took a long shower. I looked at myself in the mirror and made a promise. I was going to overcome this. I was going to rebuild myself, and I was going to do it in a way he would never forget, not out of petty revenge, but to show myself that I was stronger than I imagined. I called Jessica and asked for help. I said I needed to get out of that apartment, that I couldn't stay there anymore with all those contaminated memories. She immediately offered the guest room at her house. She said I could stay as long as I needed. I started packing my things, and it was liberating. Every item I put in the suitcase was a step toward my new life, a life without lies, without betrayals, without having to wonder if I was truly loved. I left everything that was his exactly where it was, his clothes, books, personal objects. I didn't take absolutely anything that reminded me of him. I wanted a clean start, without emotional baggage stuck to material objects. Before leaving, I did something I knew I needed to do. I wrote a letter. I wasn't going to text. I wasn't going to call. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of an argument where he could try to explain himself, manipulate, make me feel guilty. I wrote everything I was feeling, all the anger, all the pain, all the disappointment. I said I knew everything about Vanessa, the emails, the lies, the trips. I said he was a coward for not having the courage to break up with me before starting with someone else, that he had stolen 2.5 years of my life that I would never get back, but that from that moment on he had no more power over me, that I was leaving, that when he came back, he would find the apartment empty of my things, and that this was the last thing he would hear from me. I left the letter on the kitchen table. I grabbed my suitcases, and I closed the door without looking back. Every step away from that apartment was a step toward my freedom, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Living at Jessica's house was the best decision I could have made. She gave me space when I needed it, but she also didn't let me sink again. She dragged me for walks around Green Lake. She made me cook with her. We watched bad movies just to laugh, and gradually I started feeling human again. I blocked Mark everywhere, and when he tried to show up at my work, I notified security and requested a temporary restraining order. It may seem dramatic, but I needed clear boundaries. I needed him away from my life to be able to heal, and it worked. Over time, the days got lighter. I still had crises. I still cried from time to time, but they were increasingly rare. I started going to therapy, something I should have done a long time ago, and it was transformative to have a professional helping me process all of that, understand patterns, rebuild my self-esteem. I realized I had been accepting much less than I deserved in relationships, that I had been diminishing myself to fit into other people's lives, and that needed to change. I decided to focus on myself. It may sound cliché, I know, but it's real. I signed up for a gym, not to get a perfect body or to show my ex what he lost. I hate that narrative, but because exercising made me feel strong, powerful, in control of my own body. I went back to doing things I loved but had set aside. I went back to painting, something I did in college and abandoned when adult life took over. I started going out more with my friends, accepting invitations I used to decline because I had to stay home with Mark. I went to concerts, exhibitions, dinners. I reconnected with parts of myself that had been dormant during the relationship. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Not in half, waiting for someone to complete me, but whole by myself. It was so powerful. I realized I didn't need anyone to feel happy. I could build my own happiness, and that would never depend on another person again. 6 months after leaving that apartment, I was unrecognizable. Not physically, although I had lost some weight, gained some muscles, changed my hair, but emotionally, I was a different person, a better, stronger version, more aware of myself. I had gotten a small but charming apartment in Fremont. I decorated it my way, full of plants, art on the walls, a space that was completely mine. Every time I came home and opened that door, I felt a deep peace. I wasn't afraid of being alone there. I didn't feel that emptiness I thought I would feel. On the contrary, I felt complete, whole, happy with my own company. I had been promoted at work. My boss had noticed my effort in recent months, how I had dedicated myself even more, how I had brought incredible results, and he offered me the position of marketing director. It was a huge victory, not only professional but personal. I proved to myself that I was capable, that I had value, that I didn't need validation from a man to be successful. I started traveling alone. I went to Portland one weekend, to Vancouver another, and each solo trip was a liberating experience. I didn't have to worry about anyone but myself. I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and it was wonderful. I learned to appreciate my own company in a way I had never appreciated before, and that completely changed my perspective on relationships. Of course, eventually I started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just casual dinners, meeting new people, relearning to trust gradually. There were some nice guys, others not so much, but I wasn't desperate to find the next great love. I was good with myself, and anyone who entered my life would have to add value, not fill a void, because I no longer had voids to fill. And then, almost a year after everything, I met Daniel. It was at a work networking event, nothing romantic or cinematic. We started talking about a marketing campaign I had led. He was a software developer, and the conversation flowed naturally. We exchanged numbers, we started talking, and it was different from the beginning. There wasn't that suffocating intensity I had with Mark. That need to be together all the time. That fear of losing. It was light, natural, comfortable. We saw each other when we could. We talked when we felt like it. But each had their own life, their own spaces, and that was healthy. Daniel was honest, transparent. He never left me doubting his feelings or intentions. And for the first time, I felt I was in a real relationship, not in a fantasy I had created in my head. Most importantly, I never ignored the signs again. If something bothered me, I spoke up. If I had doubts, I asked. I established clear boundaries from the beginning. I said exactly what I expected from a relationship and what I wouldn't tolerate. And Daniel respected all of that. Not because he was perfect. Nobody is. But because he was mature enough to understand that a healthy relationship is made of communication, trust, and respect. I learned that true love doesn't hurt. It doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't leave you with that pit in your stomach of insecurity. True love makes you feel safe, respected, valued. And if it's not like that, then it's not true love. It's just emotional dependence disguised as romance. And I would never allow myself to confuse one thing with another again. Now, about the revenge I promised in the title. You must be expecting some story about how I destroyed Mark's life, or how I exposed him publicly, or something dramatic like that. But the truth is that the perfect revenge was much more subtle, and much more powerful than anything I could have done to hurt him. The perfect revenge was me moving forward. It was me rebuilding myself. It was me becoming the best version of myself while he continued being the same mediocre person as always. You know what hurts a cheater the most? It's not you making a scene. It's not you trying to destroy his reputation. It's not you sending hate messages. What hurts the most is you simply not caring anymore. It's you moving on with your life, being happy, thriving, and him realizing you don't need him for absolutely anything, that he became irrelevant, that you're capable of building an incredible life without him. That hurts infinitely more than any physical or public revenge. Because look, I found out through mutual friends that Mark and Vanessa didn't last even 6 months after I left his life. Apparently, when the adrenaline of the affair ended, when they had to deal with the reality of a real relationship without the excitement of hiding, deceiving, living in the shadows, they realized they had nothing substantial, that what united them was fantasy, not a real connection. I heard he tried to come back to me several times. He sent flowers to my office. He tried to talk to me through friends. He even showed up once at the cafe where we used to go. But I didn't give him even a bit of attention. I refused the flowers. I told friends I had no interest in resuming contact. And when he showed up at the cafe, I simply grabbed my things and left without saying a word. I didn't give him the pleasure of an emotional reaction, of an argument, of anything. He ceased to exist for me. And you know what was most gratifying? It was when, almost 2 years after everything, I was at a restaurant with Daniel, laughing, happy, completely immersed in my new life, and I saw Mark walk in with a different girl. He saw me too, and from his look, I could see everything. The regret, the nostalgia, the realization that he had thrown away something good. I simply waved politely, as if he were a distant acquaintance, and I went back to my conversation with Daniel. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel absolutely anything but indifference. And that was so liberating, because I realized I had truly overcome it. That man no longer had any power over my emotions, over my life, over who I was. He was just a closed chapter in a book I had moved on from a long time ago. The perfect revenge was being able to transform the worst thing that ever happened to me into an opportunity for growth. It was using all that pain as fuel to become stronger, more aware, more connected to myself. It was learning lessons that, however painful they were, made me a better person. I learned to trust my intuition. I learned not to ignore the signs. I learned to set boundaries. I learned that my value doesn't depend on being loved by someone, but on how I love myself. I learned that being alone isn't synonymous with loneliness, but with freedom. I learned that healthy relationships don't destroy you. They build you up. And I learned that if you have to diminish yourself to fit into someone's life, then you don't belong in that life. Today, when I look back, I'm even grateful, in a strange way. I'm not grateful for the betrayal, the pain, the suffering. That was horrible, and nobody deserves to go through that. But I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to rediscover myself, to rebuild myself, to become this version of me that I am today, a version that doesn't accept crumbs of love, a version that knows her worth, a version that understands she deserves to be treated with respect, honesty, and true affection. If I hadn't gone through that, maybe I would have continued in that mediocre relationship, convincing myself it was love when it was just convenience. Maybe I would have wasted more years of my life with someone who didn't deserve me, and that would have been the real tragedy. Today, I know that sometimes losing someone is finding yourself. It's discovering parts of you that were hidden, suffocated by a relationship that wasn't healthy. It's learning that you're much stronger than you imagine, capable of surviving pain you thought would destroy you. It's understanding that true love doesn't make you question your worth, doesn't leave you insecure, doesn't force you to compete for someone's attention. True love is light, it's reciprocal, it's a conscious choice every day, and if it's not like that, then it's not love, it's dependence, it's illusion. It's fear of being alone disguised as romance. If you're going through something similar now, if you're feeling that pit in your stomach that something isn't right in your relationship, I want you to know, your intuition is right. It always is. We feel when something has changed, when someone is hiding something from us, when we're not being valued the way we deserve, and you have every right to question, to demand transparency, to set boundaries. It's not being controlling. It's not being insecure. It's not being dramatic. It's having self-love. It's respecting yourself enough not to accept less than you deserve. And you deserve so much more than someone who treats you as a second option, as convenience, as someone who can be deceived without consequences. And if you've already gone through betrayal, if you're already on the other side but are still blaming yourself, Still wondering what you did wrong? I need you to hear this. It wasn't your fault. It's never the fault of the person who was betrayed. Betrayal is a choice the betrayer made, a character flaw of theirs, not a flaw of yours. You can be the most beautiful, most intelligent, most incredible person in the world and still be betrayed, because betrayal has nothing to do with what you are or aren't. It has to do with who the betrayer is, with the choices they made, with their disrespect. Don't internalize this. Don't let another person's betrayal make you question your worth. You were always enough. They weren't. Rebuilding after a betrayal isn't easy. I won't lie and say it's a quick or linear process. There are bad days. There are crises. There are moments when you doubt you'll be able to overcome it. But you will. I promise you will. One day at a time. One step at a time. You'll reconnect with who you are. You'll rediscover your strengths. You'll learn to trust again, first in yourself, then in others. And when you get to the other side, when you look back and realize everything you've overcome, everything you've learned, all the strength you've developed, you'll feel invincible because you survived the storm and came out stronger than ever. And nobody can take that away from you. So, if this story touched you in any way, if you saw yourself in any part of it, if you need a reminder that you're not alone in this journey, leave a heart in the comments. Share this story with someone you think needs to hear this. A friend who's going through something similar, a sister, a cousin, someone you know is suffering in silence, because sometimes knowing that other people went through the same thing and survived makes all the difference. And subscribe to the channel for more real stories like this, stories of overcoming, of new beginnings, of women who refuse to be defined by the worst thing that happened to them, because that's what we need. Constant reminders that we're strong, capable, resilient, and remember, you're never alone. There are thousands of women going through the same things, feeling the same pain, fighting the same battles, and each one of us who shares her story, who talks about what she lived through without shame, who transforms pain into strength, is helping another woman feel less alone, less broken, less defeated. Our stories have power. Our vulnerability has power. Our ability to rebuild ourselves has power. And the more we share this, the more we create a network of support, of empathy, of real sisterhood. So thank you for staying until the end, for listening to my story, for being part of this community of strong women. You're amazing, and no matter what you're going through now, you'll overcome it. I believe in you. The pain you feel today won't last forever. The hole in your chest will start to close. The days will get lighter. The smile will become genuine again. And you'll realize you're capable of building a beautiful life, full, happy, without depending on anyone but yourself. And when that day comes, when you look in the mirror and recognize the strong and resilient woman looking back, you'll understand that the perfect revenge was never about destroying who hurt you. It was about building the best version of yourself and showing the world, but mainly showing yourself, that you're indestructible. My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old, and this is my story of overcoming. The story of how the worst betrayal of my life transformed me into the strongest woman I could be. And if you're going through something similar now, know that your chapter of overcoming is also being written. One day at a time. You'll get there. I promise.